All right. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the webinar today. The topic today is the open digital twin ecosystem. We're going to be talking a little bit about a topic that's near and dear to our heart. It's around creating the ontology for plug and play AI. I'm Peter Reynolds, so I am the host of this webinar. I'm an industry analyst with ARC Advisory Group, and with me today is Michelle Teagles from ExxonMobil, Peter Gagliardi from Shell, and Ryan Guillory from Marathon Petroleum. And only through a technical glitch, we're missing Udayan Duda, so from BP. So if Udayan happens to join in later on, we'll bring him. So what I'd like to do is we have 60 minutes today. We want to, present a very important topic for the industry today. We have about 10 minutes of presentation and then about 45 minutes of Q&A with our panelists. And we invite all participants, as these interesting topics are being discussed, we invite you to submit any questions through the Q&A panel, and we'll do our best. Or if you need to message the host, you can certainly do that. And Dylan Fos is covering the admin part of this webinar. So open digital twin ecosystem or open digital ecosystem. Let's talk a little bit about what we see happening in industry. So we think that there's a little bit of a narrative shift that's taking place. So a lot of manufacturing and supply chain organizations and companies are undergoing some changes. Of course, there's always lots of change going on, and they're moving away from purely product-centric models and more into data-driven ecosystems. And we're seeing a big shift in how this shift occurs, and that's through interoperability of digital systems and the ability to move data across a diverse ecosystem and be able to communicate and exchange both internally and externally with your partners. So more and more we're seeing an increased use of data. That value chain is paramount, and certainly it's enabling new business processes and connecting AI and bringing together silos. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the industry today. But before we talk a little bit about plug and play AI, so the title of the slide is Houston, we have a problem. And those of you that know ARC Advisory Group, we routinely conduct pulse surveys with our clients and subscribers through benchmarking exercises. And I think it was in 2023, we looked at the adoption of digital twin and other technologies across the whole asset life cycle. So the interesting thing that we find happening is all this talk about digital ecosystems and digital twins, there's a little bit of a gap. So we're finding that in this particular survey, there were 40% of the respondents were EPCs and service providers. The other 40 were oil and gas and chemical owner-operators or asset owners. There's about 216 companies that participated in this survey and benchmarking. So still big issues that we see in industry today. Cost of maintaining digital twins is still a big issue. So there's a big sustainment problem that industry is dealing with. There's a lack of expertise for maintaining 3D and process models. Still lots of data, lots of issues with data accuracy, data quality are plaguing industrial software, digital twins, and there's poor interoperability between digital twins. So still cost, expertise, and data quality are still big challenges that are facing asset owners even today. So what that translates to is if you look at things from asset lifecycle perspective, from conceptual design, basic engineering, detailed engineering, right through design, operations, and maintain, there are some gaps across each of those processes. And we think about how asset data gets created. It starts in pre-feed or FEL1 or FEL2 throughout a project. And that data eventually goes into detailed engineering and construction and build. And ARC as a company, we work with asset owners to understand challenges and do benchmarking studies, but we also do market analysis research of what's happening with various products. So there's a number of what I would say is siloed applications across this life cycle, whether it's process simulation and optimization, the process digital twin, or engineering design tools and 3D reality capture, the 3D asset visualization digital twin, and then getting into operations and maintenance, the historian and operator training solutions, or manufacturing execution systems. What we hear from most of our clients on the asset owner side is every one of those points, there is a handover between various engineering firms to the asset owner, and there are data silos that exist between the digital twins. There's too many point solutions, incorrect fidelity, disconnected data flows, and limited standards to help guide that data so the users can get value. So the opportunity is for us to think differently about digital ecosystems and digital twins. So what ARC has done to help this is we have created a consortium around helping bring interoperability through what we call the Open Digital Ecosystem Working Group. I'm one of the chairs of that working group, and this working group is comprised of several asset owners, and we are working with different standards organizations. So there's I think it's about 2 trillion worth of annual revenue that is leading the consortium that we're working with. And this consortium, its purpose is to provide a framework for all asset owners to remove inefficiencies from operations and maintenance, to define guiding principles, to align on key industry challenges, and basically design the needs for what future digital twins and digital ecosystems might look like. And ultimately, what we see is a sustainable, scalable digital twin for industry. A little bit about the working group. There are currently, I would say, 10 to 13 asset owners that are part of this consortium. We started in 2020 with the formation of, there were 40 companies that we started meeting virtually and started gathering requirements for digital twins. We created a charter for the working group in 2022, formalized the program in 2023. So where we are right now is with this group of asset owners, we're starting to engage more of the industry groups, the standards organizations. So that's groups like the Reality Capture Network, the Construction Industry Institute, the IOGP for oil and gas, or USPI for CFOS, for Capital Facilities Information Handover, and DEXP in the Open Group. So you're going to hear from the panelists today who are part of this working group. But before we hear from them, I want to talk a little bit more about ARC and why we're in a unique position. We first formed this consortium, and people asked, well, ARC really isn't a standards organization, so why is ARC leading this effort? As it turns out, ARC also has another business that's very focused on the economics of the market. So with our market data services and the fact that we know all the suppliers, part of ARC's model is to help advise the vendors and service providers where to play and be profitable in an open digital ecosystem market. So using our 100 plus market studies and our platform and our advisory services for the market, we're helping to collect those requirements on a future open digital ecosystem and identify opportunities from a financial perspective on how companies can start to capitalize on open systems or getting more value out of digital twins. I want to focus just a little bit on some definitions and where we started. On the left-hand side is what I would say about the open digital ecosystem is it embraces interoperability across the full technology stack. So the picture there is Don Bartusiak in 2015 keynoting the ARC forum, and Don introduced a new concept for automation, and that was to turn automation on its head and introduce ideas around promoting innovation and value, excuse me, effortlessly integrating best-in-class products, preserving the asset owner information and application software, and lower the cost of future replacement. So that in 2015 is what OPA, Open Process Automation, is today with 130 plus companies. So if you think about the opportunity for an open digital ecosystem, it takes the progress from OPA and the Open Group and the work that ExxonMobil started in 2015, and it expands that on steroids across enterprise software and digital twins. So we see a digital twin as it's an open digital twin as an interesting concept. If you look at the Venn diagram is essentially it's a process model. Yes, that's the process digital twin, or thermodynamics, or simulations. Is it the 3D asset visualization? And the answer is yes, it is also the 3D asset visualization. And then it's the underlying attributes that make up the digital twin. So we see the sweet spot for where we're going forward with open asset digital twins as part of a greater open digital ecosystem. It's the interoperability and the intersection of the Venn diagram. And where we see software and some of the benefits from an ecosystem, we see a new model for software delivery that has capture separate from storage. And what that means is agnostic, neutral file formats for things like 3D reality capture, or PNIDs, or process models, or other authoring tools. The interoperability allows a greater ability to store this information and deliver it across different applications. So this model basically allows for more plug and play, less reliant on customization and APIs, and more time to focus on adding value at the consumption stage to deliver more value to customers. The goal behind this interoperable ecosystem is to not only just reduce cost, but to increase value and accelerate applications quicker. I won't go into too many of these. The working group just recently published a set of principles for open asset digital twins. And those of you that are attending this webinar today, you can have a copy of the slides. So we will be sharing our future and how we see the market responding to build digital twins. It'll be incorporating these different principles for open, agnostic, requirements for data ownership, interoperability, and transferability. But I just want to move on here quickly, folks. A little bit about where we are today as a consortium, as a working group. We have 3 subgroups today, and one of the subgroups is focused on the PNID interoperability layer and improving the accuracy and sustainment of PNIDs for both import and export, realizing that PNIDs are an important part of AI in the future as we start to add AI applications. The second subgroup for the Open Digital Ecosystem Working Group is around 3D CAD models and making sure that they are developed with consistent content, consistent level of detail, metadata, and geospatial alignment. And part of that is addressing reality capture in neutral file formats for both photogrammetry and LiDAR. We have created some sets of requirements for this as a working group deliverable and delivered those to both Construction Industry Institute and the Reality Capture Network and a few other bodies. The final working group is around open knowledge graphs, which is really important for AI. The theme of this webinar today is around becoming more plug and play in terms of AI. AI is certainly a very important initiative for most companies, and there's a lot of investment in that area. So what the industry doesn't want is the industry does not want another monolithic platform that's unsustainable for AI. So what we're working on is around looking at open knowledge graphs, looking at industrial data ontologies, and looking at specifically some use cases around AI-enabled HAZOP, or management of change, and things like operator anomaly detection. So real-world applications guided by the principles delivered to industry and guiding both service providers, asset owners, and EPCs to help get more value and help us accelerate this technology. Now, what we recommend is ultimately, and this is my last slide, folks. We, as part of creating this open digital ecosystem, our consortium and our working group is front and center, and our workshops that we facilitate across the globe. We encourage you, anybody that's attending this webinar today, if you're interested in getting more involved in this community and helping to shape the future, the first workshop is February 9th through 12th at the ARC Forum Orlando. We're hosting a workshop at that event specifically on this topic. The next one is in Barcelona, which is our European forum, May 4th through the 6th. And then Bangalore, India, and July 9th is another event. And then plus we have regional summits and partners. So as you're thinking about the words that we're going to say today around open digital ecosystem, we really encourage you a couple of things. One, we want you to join our workshops and participate, challenge us on what doesn't work, and ultimately be part of the future, how to move us to a more open, interoperable digital ecosystem. So we want you to become a change agent and help accelerate this change, and then ultimately contact ARC Advisory Group if you want to learn more about being part of the journey. So with that, what I'd like to do is call on our panelists and have a discussion about how to make open digital ecosystems a reality. So Michelle and Peter and Ryan, if you guys, I think you're all here. Maybe Michelle, we could start with you. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Michel Teurs here, Belgium, based in Brussels, working for ExxonMobil, getting to 25 years. The role that I have for ExxonMobil is Innovation and Strategy Manager. The scope that I cover is for refining chemicals globally, and we're now adding upstream operations. And the space of the products in my purview are the full suite of digital applications that handle the process. And it's the companion of all these applications that handle the assets. And then there is a section on advanced analytics. We have a lot of overlap, but this is the space that I manage.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah. Peter Gagliardi, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Peter Gagliardi. I'm at Shell. I've been at Shell for 13 years, based in Calgary, Alberta. I started in subsurface as a geophysicist, and through the ups and downs of the industry, I found myself in IT, now on a team called Data Innovation. I've done some work directly on data readiness for digital twins, but lately I've been trying to shift focus onto interoperability specifically. Yeah, so that's a bit about me.
Thanks. And last but not least, Ryan, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. Ryan Guillory. I work for Marathon Petroleum, just over 10 years with Marathon, about 16 years in downstream. Done different roles from maintenance engineer, reliability engineer, projects, capital projects, and then I got involved with our digital twin efforts here. Now I lead the corporate team to roll out digital twins across Marathon's refining and midstream assets.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay. Well, let's start. And by the way, just folks, if anybody has a question, please feel free to add the question in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to it throughout the webinar. But let's start with you, Michelle, if we could, being in Europe today. So the question, Michelle, is many organizations fear that open standards might compromise security and competitive advantage. Can you share a specific instance where adopting an open standard or neutral file formats, like, say, for example, USD or E57 or OPA or anything like that? Can you talk about where it directly accelerated a project timeline, reduced cost of ownership compared to a closed proprietary solution? So this is the tough one.
Well, we need to start somewhere. So let's start with this one. And I like the question very much because it also helps us to be very clear on what we're talking about. And there's two aspects that I pick up in the question, Peter. First one is about compromising or not compromising security and our competitive advantage. And when we're talking about an open ecosystem, that is an open ecosystem, an instance for ExxonMobil, an instance of BP, an instance of Shell. All the asset owner operators will all have our own ecosystem where we will restrict access, and by doing so, we will enhance security. Because within the ecosystem, the security model will be inherited and will offer a better security. Open is about interoperability between different vendor softwares, not interoperability, just open source the data to the entire industry or the world. That is not on the page here. It matters, and it matters to our bottom line. We were able to reduce cost. We were able to accelerate the time to deploy, so accelerate time to value by using open and interoperable platforms into those ecosystems. I'm dialing in from Frankfurt, from the DexP days. There were numerous examples, great stories of how a standard like DexP allows the industry to do this. In order to address the question here, I'll use an example from ExxonMobil. We started 5 years ago, Peter, you showed the journey. In ExxonMobil, we started that journey with the partners in the consortium. We have, over the course of those 5 years, we have made great progress by productizing our data, our asset data, and building our asset digital twin. And what we now have is critical mass content. And if we bring in a new vendor package, and could be on work permit, could be on other capabilities, when they connect to that asset digital twin, just by connecting, we preload that new package with the entire asset configuration. All our planned data will automatically become available in these new packages, which reduces an enormous amount of cost and cuts years of scaling the configuration out of the innovation.
Yeah, and just for those that might not be familiar with DexP, maybe just give just a quick overview of what DexP is.
Oh, there we go. DexP, for those interested, dexp.org is the website where the consortium is public. It's an open industry standard to render PNIDs. And that's where it started. And the consortium here, the community here, this week confirmed that the industry will also use DexP as the standard for knowledge graphs. And so as a standard that can handle graph databases and that can convey that, it's a very powerful environment.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I know there's a lot of vendor solutions, AI solutions that seem to look at PNIDs as part of their RAG, part of their architecture for learning how plants and assets work. And so I know that the working group wrote a paper, I think last year timeframe, around the interoperability, the value of interoperability and data exchange for PNIDs, and we talked about that as the use case around what was working, but I think there was also some guidance around opportunities for improvement. But of course, many sites, struggle with keeping their PNIDs up to date, and even some of the tools today, they're still not getting very good accuracy in conversion the PNIDs into knowledge graphs. 60 to 70%. So I'm really glad that things are going well with XP.
So, but Peter, before we leave that topic, now that you mentioned it, industry and academia are reporting much better number now, and getting machine generated PNIDs, getting AI reading the PNIDs, and getting advanced analytics. But it's gonna be another topic.
Yeah. So they should join DexP, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on a little bit. Ryan, maybe let's talk a little bit. We often hear about the golden thread of data, right? So, but the reality is most asset owners, they have all these fragmented and legacy systems. So how do we move from the theoretical idea of vendor agnostic digital twins into the practical reality of actually integrating 30-year-old operational technology with modern architectures? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest challenges for owner operators with legacy data systems and legacy assets. You can't necessarily throw those systems away. Some of those systems are the system of record, and there's just no change in that. But what we can do is apply pressure to those vendors and request things like, hey, do you even have an API? If you don't have an API, let us help you develop one so that we can at least get our data out of there. There are plenty of offerings in the industry for, aggregate solutions that will bring in these disparate data sources. But if you're not careful with the way you frame that contract and evaluate their product, that can become your new vendor lock-in, where your new data platform has pulled in all the disparate data sources. That's great. That's what we all want. But then when you try to get that data back out, you hit a new roadblock where the way they built the knowledge graph is not translatable into the specific use cases that you're looking for. And so I think going into those conversations, going into those contract negotiations and your technology selection, you've really got to have your eyes open. You need to understand what the end product needs to be. What we've found is there's an almost infinite amount of use cases that come from our end users, our operators, our process engineers, project folks, supply chain. And not one single platform or one vendor offering is going to solve all those use cases for you. Any way you can slice the data, someone's going to ask for it. Any way you can compile and look at data in a different way, you're going to get a question, can I do this? And if you're not careful, this new shiny thing you just built can become your new lock-in. So it's just really important to have the end goal in mind. Think 5 years from now, think 10 years from now, where we're trying to go before you lock yourself into a new locked-in system, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. So, Peter, we had a fantastic workshop and at the Shell facility in Houston with the working group and others. And I know you gave a fantastic presentation to bring us a little step closer to plug and play AI. So, in your presentation, Peter, if I can go from memory here, so you had traditional ETLs. You've shifted from traditional ETLs to what you call the five-stage pipeline of collect, load, evolve, accumulate, and reuse based on something you call borrow, right? So the be clearer method, right? So for companies pursuing open asset digital twins or plug and play AI, where do you recommend that they start? Especially considering knowledge graphs, do they start with the minimum artifacts? Models, rules, contracts, or where should companies get started?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a big mindset shift here to go from a traditional ETL where you're kind of pushing data around to this be clearer method, which is a method that was developed by a company called Borrow, who also have a top level ontology. But the idea here is you're adding semantic information into the data as it goes through, and so because traditional ETLs are more just pushing data back and forth, getting their format, changed to fit into a new system. Whereas with this method, you're adding semantics, you're adding a layer of understanding and kind of deeper knowledge into it. It does make sense to start at more of a basic level. There's a lot of kind of hidden knowledge that you find when you go through a process like this. You look for, first you want to collect whatever standards exist. You want to collect data in as raw of a form as possible from, as close as you can to the direct source, to the system of record. But you're going to find, even after all that, there's standards that people know in their head that they didn't write down, or there's colloquialisms, or people take shortcuts. And so, for me, for example, just going into tagging schemes, like, every asset starts with a standard. There's industry standards, there's internal standards that are based off of the industry standards. And then every asset, every site has their own little nuances and kind of, historical reasons for making adjustments to the tagging standards here and there. And it's such a basic thing, but you kind of have to start at the basics there. Yeah, so I think just getting this mindset shift is a really big deal, and of course keeping transparent, open dialogue with all stakeholders, and just keeping in mind you're going to be iterative about this. You're not going to get the answer right the first time, so do what you can, move on, and then you can come back later when you kind of get better information.
By the way, and Michelle and Ryan, feel free to jump in at any time if you guys have got ideas. In the meantime, I'll jump to a question because it sort of ties into Michelle question I wanted to ask you. So one of the questions from the attendees, hello everyone, what challenges do organizations need to be prepared for when adopting digital twin ecosystems? So let's just diverge a little bit from technology and talk about the organizations that are fundamentally responsible for this. So thinking about organizational design and culture, right? So this is how do organizations get ready. So building an open digital ecosystem often forces IT or various digital organizations and OT, operational technology. Here's IT OT again. They need to collaborate and work closer, right? So from an organizational perspective, where do you see collaboration failing and what governance structures do you think is going to bridge this gap? Michelle, do you got ideas there?
ID certainly experience. I've experienced this, yes. So, but before jumping into the answer, not everything always fails. There are good examples of great successes, but we also see the ugly one. People management of change is in, and that has been with us for decades, is the biggest hurdle. And when what we're talking about here is across OT and IT, across the plant control space and the data space in the manufacturing side, as well as the IT. And it makes it more vulnerable. And what we need is to get a good understanding of the perspectives from both sides, as well as very good clarity on what outcome are we after. And if we need to force ourselves, we can't start before we're absolutely clear on what are we targeting, because otherwise things start drifting, and then we don't keep that focus in the organization to be aligned and deliver. And those would be off the cuff promptly my first responses here.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah. Jumping a little bit to so we have some software vendors, OEMs, attending this meeting today. So William asks the question, so as a software and instrumentation vendor, what standards should I be looking at in this new digital ecosystem world, right? So of course, as a working group, we are not developing standards. We're not picking winners or losers, but we are identifying, a scope of standards that will help meet the goals of an open digital ecosystem. And of course, DEXB, Michelle, you're at the DEXB event in Frankfurt today. So maybe I'll just put this question to any one of the panelists. What should the vendors be looking at for standards? And furthermore, I guess the second question I would add to William's question is what should they do to get involved?
Who wants to go first? I can take a stab at it. Standards is an endless space, and we have standards upon standards, and so really one of the things that we need to do, and there I think as asset owner operators and group together in the ARC consortium, is to help drive convergence to saying, hey folks, here is a set of standards. that we want to convert to. We as asset owner operators, we have the responsibility to be clear on our requirements, on the use cases that we're after, on our vision of a future. But we're not building solutions, and so it's critical to have the collaboration of the companies, the groups in the industry who build the solutions, the EPCs, the integrators, the consultants, to help us come to a working selection of standards. Peter, you were showing an upcoming agenda of future workshops. It's in that type of events, not exclusive, that said, there is more happening in industry, but it's in that type of environments where we bring the right people together to drive that convergence. And from standards perspective, the way I look at it is, obviously we need to address the problem, but critical mass and convergence is what will help us select the right standards, which is obviously getting the people together in those workshops is the way to get there.
So another question, on standards, and I know we've discussed principles, and I glanced very quickly over the principles slide that the working group published last month. But maybe that's just an open question to any one of you. Are the standards organizations, and maybe just to name a few, so USPI, right, is one. There's the Construction Industry Institute. There is IOGP doing some great things. There's the Open Group. There's a whole host of companies that are working around this open interoperability space. So the question maybe to any one of you is, so do you think the standards groups, organizations will be interested in our principles, or why not? I stumped the panelists.
Maybe I'll jump in because this is something I think about a lot in the interoperability space. But I think the thing is, the standards, you can't always collect standards into another standard. Standards, I think about like tomatoes and cucumbers, for example. So are they fruits or vegetables? I know it's kind of a silly example, but the answer is, are they a fruit or vegetable? It depends who you talk to. If you talk to like a botanist, the cucumber is a fruit because of like the biology of the cucumber. But if you talk to a chef, they use it like a vegetable because it's not super sweet. It's kind of, more on the crunchy side. And so it doesn't really make sense to try and converge it into a single spot. You'd rather have a way to easily, kind of recognize who your target audience is and then apply the standard that's correct for that target audience. So I think when it comes to standards panels, having just generally these recognition that their standard might not always be the target audience, and they need ways to be able to talk across each other. And so the more open they can be about some of the more mechanical items, the better it is. And even, the more they can come up with their own interoperability from standard to standard, the more helpful it is for everyone. So yeah, that's my 2 cents to that one.
Just to add a little, I was just going to add a little to that, to build off what Peter was talking about. But I think standards are important, and they're great, and there's a lot of good work that goes into them. But when I see a new standard that would help progress where we're trying to go with our digital ecosystem, the first question I have is, how can I then go change or manipulate or reframe my data to meet this standard? And I think sometimes it's easy to focus on writing the standard and producing it and say, hey, everyone follow this and we'll be good. Yeah, but how do I get there? How do I take, for Dexby is a perfect example, like how do I go translate all of my old static PNIDs into this new format? That's a really hard thing, but I think more people that are working on standards probably need to spend some time thinking about how are people going to convert their old data to this model? How are we going to get them up to this standard? And that's where the owner operators need help, because we don't spend a lot of time in that space. We're happy to follow standards where we can, but if the translation's hard and it's fraught with peril and full of error, we're going to sit on it. We're going to wait until there's a solution in the market. So I think that there's a lot of space out there for, and we're seeing it with people trying to get this conversion to DXB. But there's, you could probably bring up 50 other standards that we could be following that would make our lives easier. But we have all this legacy data issues, and we have no real clear path to convert to the standard.
Very good. Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. Oh,
Peter,
go ahead, Michelle.
Very short one. To the positive side, building on what I said here, standardization bodies typically have representation from entire spectrum of the industry. The software companies have delegation to the standardization bodies, consultants, asset owner operators. And this is what can help us come to an effective setup that we're able to migrate to it, that we're able to adopt, and that works for us.
Okay, yeah. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. We've got about a little over 15 minutes left. Let's think about life cycle execution. So from brownfield and greenfield perspective, so it's easy to build a digital twin for a brand new facility, obviously, but for executives here that are managing brownfield assets, what's the minimum viable product you think for retrofitting an open digital twin without breaking the bank? Any comments?
I can tell you where we started, and it was P&IDs. Taking a static CAD drawing and bringing some intelligence to that. It could be as simple as, I need a link from this P&ID to the next P&ID. I just need to trace this line through the system, through several units. I think it's surprising how many people don't have that at this day and age, but we were one of them. And so we said, hey, this is a data set that almost everyone uses to some degree in our downstream operations and projects. And it is the thing we're held to from OSHA when OSHA comes looking, like, how accurate are your P&IDs? And so I think that is a good place to start. From there, you can just keep building. I mean, I think it's a great foundation to at least get your regulatory things in place, give people, access to information much quicker and faster. And it doesn't take a whole ton of work to link P&IDs to ISOs, link P&IDs to other P&IDs, and then start linking the assets on the P&IDs to PI data or maintenance orders or historical information or data, data sheets, documents. I think that's a pretty low kind of foundation that you can build from.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah. So Michelle, over to you. So let's go back to principles again. I know there was a lot, right? Agnostic, open, transferable. When you think about the principles that we've just recently published, and of course I don't know how long it took, maybe 6 months, I think, for us to finalize that list. So is there a principle that's most valuable to you, right? Where do you see this principle being met in the near future?
Yeah, and then yes, it took a while, but we're very happy that our baby's there. And so for everybody in the audience, Peter brought it up quickly in the introduction. But if you look in LinkedIn, Peter Reynolds here posted it last week on LinkedIn, so people can access what we're talking about. There's 5 principles there, and an open interoperable ecosystem, we only get there if we meet all 5. And so I am challenged responding, picking which of the 5 is the most critical one. The way I want to answer this is, when I think about this, the last one, transferability, is the one that will truly differentiate in industry, because for any player, regardless what role you have in the end-to-end, for any player to support and offer transferability, that requires to be very clear on what your differentiating competitive capability is. What are you selling through what capability will you drive sales? Because only if you have that clarity, you will be comfortable to allow transferability to be offered in your solution. So it's more from inquisitive perspective. I'm intrigued to see how this will evolve, but all of them will need all of them in order to have a truly open interoperable ecosystem.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other comments before we move on, guys? I'll stop sharing. Yeah. Okay, Peter, let's go back to you. Like, I know you talked a little bit about this earlier around classifications. So let's dive in a little bit on knowledge graphs, because I know that's your core area. And I think that you had advocated enabling interoperability between multiple classification schemes, such as process versus maintenance, then force a single taxonomy. So from a governance perspective, like what mechanisms, owner, change control, mappings, how do you keep all that synchronized and audible as the plant continues to change? Because of course, they always change.
Hmm. Yeah, well, so it's a tough question. That is for sure one of the challenges is keeping up with the changes. And I think, having people who are accountable at site or very close to the site that work directly with the site, having people accountable for what are the standards that are being used and followed, and especially from a lens of what's practical for the site. Not just the pie in the sky standard, but what's actually something we can implement, and you just have to keep in good contact with them, because it really comes down to what are people able to do in their day to day, what do they have time for while they're putting out all of the fires that happen, and yeah, it's true. Like, at Shell, we have plants that have been kind of around since around the Second World War, and they've gone through lots of changes and lots of standards. And the good thing is, in our current day and age, it's, if you're going to make changes now, they're a lot easier to track than, when they were making changes in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And so you can kind of work on building up to the current day, and then, make sure in partnership with the site, you are coming up with sustainable processes that they can follow, and that they have, specific accountability and contacts for.
Thanks, Peter. Ryan, over to you. So let's go back to lifecycle execution again. So, of course, one of the most expensive inefficiencies is the loss of the data during the handover from EPC to O&M operations. How can Open Digital Twin and the standards specifically solve that digital drop-off that happens when a capital project goes live? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen there's a lot of resistance to change there. I think the EPCs have their systems that they've grown to love and trust, and they want to force us into their model. We want to force them into our model. So I think there's gotta be some conversations around the mutual benefit of the seamless interoperable handover. And so, we've spent a lot of time going back to EPCs after we get the handover and saying, you've got to completely rework all this. You've got to add all this metadata. We can't bring this into our system this way. And, having those conversations way on the front end and working through the barriers and the challenges, it's got to be a necessary step going forward, because what I think is going to happen is, when we go to do that, the selection for the firm who's going to get the work, maybe it's a major capital project. The firms that can offer flexibility on that handover, that data, the way it's outlaid, the way it's framed up, that fits our model better, is going to get the work at the end of the day. And so, and that's not something that it's not a threat. It's just where we're all going. All these owner operators together see this problem, and it's causing lots of rework. It's causing lots of downtime. It's causing confusion on startup. And that's just risk that we can't afford to take anymore. So I think there's just got to be a more open and honest conversation about the importance of this and where we're all going as an industry.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. So I know this is definitely a work in progress. I don't think that any system is truly interoperable, and even OPA is certainly in various stages of commercialization and showing progress and showing results. So we got a lot of work to do, right? We many more workshops, many more meetings, more engagement with standards organizations to keep them up to speed, more work and inform the vendor market. But if we, it's a question for you, Michelle. If we had to reconvene this panel again in 2031, another 5 years, right? What is one standard practice in digital twins today that you think would be considered obsolete, and what new radical open concept would become the new normal?
And so
It's a tough one.
people who know me, I never waste an opportunity to embarrass myself. So here we go. We'll see in 2031. If we look outside to other industries, we already see those changes happening, and we have the advantage in this type of question that our industry is lagging a bit, and then we can see what is happening elsewhere. And I'm referring to examples from medical, from consumer care, from home, from home care, from retail, where industries have transitioned from where we are today, which is, we call it data driven, but we measure data by sensors, hardware sensors, and those data points, they feed our models. We will transition to a model first way of working. And we need that integrated ecosystem in order to get there. So that will be a strong driving force to allow us to accelerate. What that paradigm shift, what that means is that we will start pretty soon to use the model as our reality. And the model is what we see in our model is what we will trust. And one benefit that will radically change the way we work is we will have much more granularity of our data points. We will have data in areas or data points that we cannot measure with hardware sensors, and we will improve the fidelity of the data that we have or the insights that we get from our model. And one example where we already see this happening today is in mass balancing that we use for bias management. Mass doesn't get created, mass doesn't disappear. We know what goes in must come out or is accumulated within the environment that we analyze. And today, if we do mass balancing, if we from there, if we see that what the model defines as the number versus what the sensor, the hardware sensor reads, if they don't match, we will go and correct the raw data. We will apply a bias. And in the future, that will be the normal way of working, where whatever the model tells us, we will have validated our model. We will trust our model more than we trust the raw data. And today is the reverse.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Ryan? I know this marathon, thinking about standard practice. So from your point of view, if what's standard practice today that you think will be obsolete, and what radical open concept is going to become a reality in 5 years? What do you predict?
The handover of paper documents. I think that has got to go away. Managing boxes and boxes and millions of documents, and then sometimes the best we can do with those is just scan them in, and now we have a PDF, but there's no intelligence layer, there's no semantic layer, there's nothing there to work with for an LLM. I think all of that will be completely gone and obsolete soon, and I can't wait for that.
Peter, what about your point of view? I'm sure you weren't working on knowledge graphs 5 years ago. So what do you see as the future for the data management side? What do you predict?
Yeah, I'm thinking hopefully, 5 years from now, it'll become a lot more of a common thing to work with for people. I think people have become very comfortable with like relational databases and that idea of looking at things in tables, but I would love to see in 5 years people just pulling up operators or like the people on the ground just pulling up a knowledge graph and being able to jump through all of the different connections to find like work orders related to something they found on their 3D model or something like that. And just to have it be a natural part of the work. Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks, Peter. Yeah. And folks, if you didn't get your question asked, or if there's still more information that you need, like, please contact us at the end of this. You can contact our client manager. You can contact me at preynolds, REYNOLDS at arcweb.com. Get a hold of us, and we'll be happy to try to answer your questions and take your suggestions, because I've noticed there's some comments coming through about academia and a few others. So as we wrap up in the last 3 minutes, gentlemen, given the vast stakeholders that we have on this webinar, EPCs, main digital contractors, engineering service providers, automation companies, software providers, asset owners, they're all in attendance. What recommendations do you have going forward? Let's start with you, Michelle.
Okay. It's a big transformation that is coming, and we can only get through there as an industry. And the reason that in the RC group and that the asset owner operators that we spend time to do this together is from owner operator perspective, we need that consistency, but we don't build the solutions. We're not the consultants. And so we need to bring the entire industry in the room, and all voices matter, and make sure that we come to the right way forward.
Ryan, what do you think? What are final recommendations as we close?
Yeah, I'll just say, be open to change. I think change is happening really fast. AI has radically shifted the way we think about most of our problems in the industry. And I would say also think about your value timeline a little bit further out. I think there's been a focus for a long time on, we'll solve this particular problem today. We're not worried about your problem in 2 or 3 years. I'd like to see all of us be thinking a lot more longer term about the systems we're trying to build, the platforms we're trying to build, the use cases we're applying them to, and work together on some really, far out thinking solutions around those problems.
Thanks, Ryan. And Peter, closing comments and recommendations going forward?
Yeah, I'll kind of give a bit of a different one. So because I come from the subsurface world, I would argue in the subsurface world, we've been working with, essentially digital twin on a subsurface scale for, 1 or 2 decades already. And there's probably a lot of lessons that we can take from how those technologies developed on the subsurface side and figure out how to apply them. And one hint is behaviors and working in partnership with people, bringing people along the journey with you. That's a big piece of it. But yeah, dig into how things were on the subsurface side is my recommendation.
Thanks, Peter. All right, Michelle, Ryan, Peter, thanks so much for your time today. We really enjoyed the session. Those of you who are attending the session, please follow up, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that we didn't answer. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thanks.